thank you again, Sandeep, for accepting my invitation. And over to you, mate.
Thank you, Wahid, and thank you to the Persian Power BI user group community for joining me. Really appreciate you having me here. And as Wahid said, this is one of those topics that comes up very often, especially with all the emergence of AI, machine learning, and Power BI developers often wonder, should I learn Python or not, and what's in it for me? So hopefully this session will help you answer some of those questions. Let me go ahead and share. It does say only meeting organizers and presenters can share. Uh,
Uh, you should be able to share. Let me check that again. Where is your? Why I can't find it? Come on, mate. Make a presenter. Yep. That's you can share it now.
okay, yeah, I can see it now. Yep, perfect. Good. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so a little bit about myself here. So I'm a senior Power BI architect at Hitachi Solutions America. We are one of the gold partners, Microsoft gold partners for Dynamics, the data platform, and lots of other things. I have been into data analytics and data science for over 10 years now. As Wyatt mentioned, I have a blog and I'm very active in the community. If you are on Twitter, not so much on LinkedIn, but if you're on Twitter, do follow me at Pawar BI, my last name Pawar, and then BI, of course, as in Pawar, Power
That's the
BI.
best handle. No, you can sell it.
Easy to remember.
You can sell it for more than 1 million, I think.
Yep. Okay, so a little bit about the agenda. So I don't have a ton of slides here. In fact, this and then I think just one more. So what is this session about? I'm going to show you how to use Python in your Power BI workflow as an external tool. And the reason why I have highlighted external tool here, the I think when somebody hears that Python in Power BI, the first thing that comes to their mind, or rather two things that come to their mind, is using Python inside of Power Query. I hear a little bit of an echo. Okay, we're
Just
good now.
mute that person. That's okay now.
Okay. Yeah, as a inside of a Power Query as a transformation step, and then using Python as a visualization tool inside of Power BI. We are not going to do two of those things. What this session is not about is teaching you Python. So I don't expect you to know any Python at all. If you do know Python, that will help. And then hopefully, if you have any questions, I can answer those. But this session is more about expanding your tool chest, adding Python as one more tool that you can use during your Python workflow. And what I aim to show and inspire you to do is learn Python so that it's one of those tools that is so versatile that once you learn it, it will help you in the entire Power BI workflow. And that's the reason why I said workflow, not report development. So let me see, go up here, and then we can go get started right here. So the very first thing that I'm going to show you is a very simple Power BI data set, nothing fancy here. So I have one sales table and then a product table with a relationship between the two. And if we look at the data itself, I have the typical sales order table with order date, order ID, and then the quantity, sales, profit, and all that good stuff. And then I also have the product table with the product ID and the categories. Now, if we were to analyze this inside of Power BI, what you would do is you would go to transform data, and then you would start doing your transformations inside of Power Query. If you go to transform on the right hand side, let me start my zoom it as well. At any point, if you have any questions, if you don't see something, please stop me and ask. But if you see in the transform step, you will see that there is a Python run Python script. When you click on it, it adds another step here as a Python step. But the way you get that to work, and typically, like I said earlier, when you hear somebody say Python inside of Power BI, this is the thing that comes up in their mind. This is most of the times that's what they're referring to, run Python inside of Power BI. Let me just quickly show you how, if you are interested in doing that, and my hope is that I will dissuade you from doing this with the reasons. But when you go to options, if you have Python installed, if you don't have Python installed, just Google Python, install it, and that's it. There is nothing more to it. Oh, looks like this just got updated. Looks nice. Okay, so if you go to Python scripting, here, so there is under global options, there is a Python scripting, and then you can choose set a Python home directory. And I think I have multiple installed versions installed, but the Power BI will do a good job and automatically detect which Python version you have, which Python ID you have. In fact, you can give an IDE as well, meaning if you have VS Code installed, when you launch it from Power BI, it will use VS Code and things like that. So it's pretty smart with that. So once you have Python installed, there are only, I think, three more things that on top of the base Python installation that you have to do. There are three libraries: Pandas, NumPy or NumPy, and then Matplotlib. Pandas is for data analysis, which is what I'll be showing you. NumPy is for computational analysis, and then Matplotlib is for plotting purposes. Although you won't be using Matplotlib inside of Power Query for any plotting, that's one of the requirements that you have to have it installed. Once you have that installed, and by the way, the reason why I'm going so fast here, because again, the goal is not to show you how to use it, but to expose you and then give you pros and cons of each of these things. Once you have Python installed in Power BI, you can come to run Python script, and let me show you how it works. Okay, when you launch it, it just works just like. Let me just do something here. Dataset, and let's say, let me go over to this. It'll be easier. Don't worry about what I'm doing here. I'm just going to go click. And what I wanted to show you is once I do that, it added run Python script as a step here, which is similar to what you would do in any of the Power Query steps, right? Now it created that. I can expand this table and get my transformation step. And if you are somebody who is coming from Python background, or our background works the same way, a bar background, it's easy for you to think that, well, I don't need to learn Power Query because I can directly go to run Python, do all my transformations over here using Pandas or any library. If you are a data scientist, you may think that, okay, I'm a data scientist. I know I have my Python code, I have my machine learning library and everything. So let me go here and then put my code here, do all the transformations, and not worry about Power Query or learning Power Query or M. And I think that's where most of the people get it wrong. And the reason for that is there are uh, severe limitations if you use Python this way inside of Power Query, because this run Python script inside of Power Query, you can only use the personal gateway, not the standard gateway. And if you know the difference between the two, the standard gateway, it's enterprise gateway, your administrator or the gateway or administrator and people who have access to data sources, they can add other people inside your organization to that data source. If you use Python, that's not possible. It's only for you and only you can use it. Other limitations, and I have a blog on this. You can take a look at it. The other limitations here are there is if you have a massive data set, which is very typical inside of Power BI, there is a limit on the time limit for if you use Python. I think it expires after like 5 minutes or something like that. So that's another limitation. And then the big one is the security. You have to enable or make your data set as public. That doesn't mean that the data will be public, just the way Power BI stores inside their data center. It's labeled as public. Nobody else can still get access to it, but the container that holds it, it's labeled as public. So those are the big limitations, and that's one of the reasons why you should never be using Python inside of Power BI. Having said that, I've been using Power BI pretty much since it was launched, and over my long career in Power BI, I've only used it once, and that was just last month because I had a customer who absolutely needed to use it because they had a proprietary algorithm, Python algorithm that they wanted to use. So I had to use it. There was no other way to get around that with their infrastructure. So hopefully that makes the first point clear that why you should not be using it. Now, if you do run into the scenario where you have to use it, one thing that you have to know here is it always doesn't matter what the name of your table is here. So it says product, right? And then I have another one here, sales. Doesn't matter what the name of your table is or the query is. Python always refers to it as a data set. So the way I would do that is, let's say I have df, meaning I'm creating a new data set, df data set, and then I am going to say here, let's say category, and then let's see what that does. That's the name of my column, and then click on OK. And then you see this, if I hover over it, it returned two data frames or two data sets in this case. One is the original table, which if I click on that, it just gives me back the same thing that I used. And the second one here should be just the name of the column. So I just extracted one column from that data set. And if you're not familiar with Python, it's very similar to, in some regards, it's similar to M. So notice what I did here, data set and the name of the column. So if I cancel this out, and let's say we are over here, if I add another step and I say, go here, custom. So I'm here, and then I say, let's say, go here, and then category. Let me zoom in. So this is my name of my column, right? This is a step, and then the category, and then if I press that, I get the column, which is similar to what we did in Power. It gives me the list. If I want to extract the column itself in M, I just put it in two double brackets and hit enter, which gives me the column, right? Which is what we did in Python as well. I have the table name and the name of the column inside a list, which is what we did. So if you're not familiar with Python, but if you have used M, you already know a whole lot. It's just a different language, but the semantic and the way you think about it and then approach things is very similar to that. So the concepts will be very, very similar as you start learning Python. So that's point number one. Another thing here is once you, there is also a way to use Python here as a visual. Don't do that either because that has limitations too. One, once you create it, it just outputs a static image. You cannot do highlighting on top of that, and there is almost always no the reason to use that. I've seen people use it for violin charts or box plots and all that. Deneb can do that, and hopefully I'll show you if we have time how you can use Python to create the Vega Lite code that you can use inside of Deneb and then create that image inside in Power BI. Okay, so I guess the point number one here, hopefully I made that clear, that don't use Power Python inside of Power BI. And then second, don't use the Python visual inside in the visuals. Okay, so what do you use Python for? Most people know about those two things in Power BI. So what do you use and how do I use Python in Power BI? So let me show you how I do stuff here. The very first one here is if I go here and I want to analyze, let's say, analyze this data. It says product ID, category, subcategory, product name. And I am just interested in seeing the, let's say, the number of categories in or number of products, just the number of product names, right? Total number of product names. The way you would do that here in Power Query or in DAX is, or in Power BI is you will go to product name and then create a maybe a card and then go here and then go count 1862 or you can create a DAX measure and then do that. My main problem with Power BI is that Power BI is not an exploratory data analysis tool because once I create this and I get rid of it, there is no way for me to go back. I'll have to create either recreate it or create new sheet. And when I'm exploring data, trying to getting my hands on the data for the first time, I like to understand the data better. And the way Power BI is, it's very structured, right? You create the DAX, and we all know the pains that we go through to create the DAX measures, right? You don't typically create the DAX and forget about it, right? You go in very iterative steps, and then you clean up afterwards. So which means that if you have to go back to something in your production report, you don't have that anymore. And that's why I like to use Python as my side tool. You can do the exact same thing with Excel as well as your side tool to do the data analysis. So how would I do that? So let me go back to this product table here. I will right click and then say over here, I will say copy table. Okay, so I'll go copy table, which is going to grab that entire table in my memory. And then I have Jupyter Notebook that is running. And if you're not familiar with Jupyter Notebook, it is basically, it looks like this. Jupyter Notebook is an open source tool. It's an interactive way of writing code, be it Python, SQL, R, C Sharp, PowerShell, anything. You can install that and use the Jupyter Notebook, which is, and I guess the power of Jupyter Notebook is you get the results instantly back right there. So it's a more interactive experience. So in this case, I have loaded pandas as PD. So pandas, like I said, is the library that we use for data analysis inside of Python. Um, don't focus on the code and what I'm doing. Focus on why I'm doing it and what's the output of that. You can always learn the code, but I would like you to focus on the reasons behind why I'm doing that. So what I'll do is the code, the table that I just copied, I can just go say PD. I'm gonna say DF, meaning data frame, and then read PD, which is this pandas read underscore clipboard, and then enter. And now if I see the data is magically here. So I have my data here, so which now allows me to do my further analysis where I can say df, and then just like how I showed you earlier, product name, and then go count 1862. Let me zoom that in a little bit here. 1862. So which does one thing for me is that I don't have to create the DAX, unnecessary DAX or unnecessary visuals inside of Power BI. If I always have a Jupyter notebook that's open on the side. I can just pop it open, do a quick analysis, or get my results back, and then I know what it is, and then just move on. So I guess that's use case number one, and that's probably one of my most often used examples of how to use Python with Power BI. Now we did that for one table, right? What if you wanted to do that for multiple tables because we have a relationship created, and you want to be able to get this data in the Jupyter notebook or in Python so that you can do more analysis. And this is where uh, you can access the analysis services instance of Power BI directly using Python. So what I mean by that is whenever you start a Power BI client, if we go to and go to Power BI desktop, you will see that it instantiates a Microsoft SQL Server Analysis Services, right? So we already have an SSAS instance uh, running in the background, which has the server ID or which has the server address and also the database address inside a container that's already running. What if we could access that directly? So just like a SQL Server or just like your any other data, and then access that data directly in Python, right? Then in that, if that was the case, then we would be able to access this data in Python. So the way you would do that is I'd written a blog post about, if you go to my website, powerbi.com. Should be somewhere over here. Accessing Power BI datasets via XML endpoint in Jupyter Notebook. It's almost 2-3 years old, and it gives you or walks you through all the steps for the same thing that I'm going to show you, that how you can do that using this. So the way this will work is I'll go to external tools. First, I need two things. One, the server address and the database name for the SSAS instance, okay, which I can get by launching DAX Studio. So it's opening on my other screen. DAX Studio, and then if we see at the bottom here, localhost 49834, I can grab that. So copy that. So I've copied that. And so I have copied that. And then if you follow the blog post, there is one library called SSAS API, as the name suggests, that you have to use. But I will put in that server address here. And then from DAX Studio, I will also go right click here and then say copy database name. So copy database name, go here, and then put the database name. The code itself, that's already on my it's already on my blog. So again, don't focus on the code, but I do that. And then I can also pass the DAX that I want to get, evaluate, and then product. So I want to get the product column, the entire product column here. So it gives me the product column, and then I can continue doing my analysis. And we'll come back to this in a minute. So why would I want to do that? One, because when I'm doing the analysis in Power BI, or creating reports in Power BI, I write DAX, right? So the semantic logic, the business logic is already created in Power BI. I don't want to duplicate that in Python. This allows me to access that measure directly in Python. Two, this also allows me to write better DAX and debug DAX. So how does that work? So let's say I have the product name. Let me grab that. And then I have a measure created here, which is some simple sum x of sales quantity multiplied by the sales. So let me grab that and then put it here. And let's sort that. So I have my product names and the sales amount, right? They are in the order. Now, what I would like to do is let me go here and then totals, disable the totals. What I want to do is one of my requirements is that I need to get the sales amount for only the products with sales amount greater than $50,000. And I can do that easily by just writing a quick measure that if the sales amount is greater than 50,000, just return me the sales amount. And this, if there is no sales amount, or if that product doesn't have sales greater than 50,000, then it will be, it will return blank basically. So I can grab that and put it here. And let's see, it does work, right? Now it works fine. I have wherever it is 50,000 and above, I have the amount. Where it is less than 50,000, I have the blank. If I create uh, a card and then drag and drop that inside of this, I expect that this will be some millions of dollars. And then the $50,000 version that we created, maybe that one should be, I don't know, maybe 10%, 20% of that, basically. So let's grab that and drop it here. But that does not seem to be the case, right? Which we can also see by going here and in totals and turn on the totals. So for the sales amount, the total is 11,488. For 50,000, it is still 11,488. And then, but it is showing me the right amount. Now, in this case, because all of you have experience with Power BI, you know what exactly is going on. But that may not always be the case if you're not able to see what exactly it's doing, right? And this is where how I use Power BI or Python to debug and understand if my DAX is returning the right values. And the way I do that is, let me cancel this and then also get rid of the totals. I can go to optimize, performance analyzer, start, and then analyze this visual. In this case, the visual itself is very simple, so I could have easily written a summarize. But let me copy the DAX query by going to performance analyzer table, and then I copied the DAX query for that visual, right? And then in DAX Studio, I can open it. And it's, like I said, it's essentially just summarize column and then product sales amount. So let me grab that and go over here, or rather here maybe. Yep. So over here, and what I can do is I can pass that as a DAX to that, right? So I pasted that as DAX and then run that query, which gives me the exact same table that I saw earlier. Now, this is the data frame, pandas data frame. I can start writing this pandas data frame. So TF and what we talked about earlier, I want to first filter and then get the column, right? So I'll go here and then say, in this case, the name of my column is just like DAX, sales amount. So my column, my table, and then sales, I think the sales amount. Let me confirm. Yep, sales amount. And then I want to filter values that are greater than 50,000, which gives me true false, just like DAX. No, nothing changes. I can pass that to the data frame to get the values or the data frame that has only $50,000 values. Um, and then sales amount. Here, and then I just need to sum this, just like tax, right? So this value should be more like $3 million instead of the $11 million. And as you know, the reason why it didn't work in this case is because of the transition, right? Because when I added this in here, add the total, with my measure, if the sales amount greater than 50,000, the context here was all the products here, and yes, this amount is greater than 50,000, so it returned the entire amount. It lacked that row context. So we can fix that is just by iterating over the product name itself, right? So if I take that and add that here, I get the right value here, which would be the same thing over here. And this is a very simple example, but I have run into scenarios where, yes, I can use DAX Studio to debug a lot of these DAX measures, but it is still DAX, right? You don't know how the transition is working, what the filter context is, the evaluation context is, what else is going on. So it can be very hard. You can use Excel, but you can't really use Excel because if your data set is too large, then you cannot. And then plus on top of that, I can use this to visualize my values as well, because I can use this because this is Python. I can easily plot these values, and I have on many occasions been able to figure out data issues mostly just because I was able to do all of this stuff. So all of this to say that if you use Python as an external tool along with Power BI in your workflow, it allows you to do the data analysis, this exploratory data analysis, and you can save this, right? None of this is going away. So you can save this notebook for your own purposes, come back to it later, and then pick up your analysis. Whereas if you were doing this inside of Power BI, you have to keep that measure. In here, you can also add you can also create or add a markdown as well, meaning text to that as well. So you can add your commentary, what this is doing. I mentioned up here this exact the server and the DB name. This exact same code will work for your premium data sets as well. If you have a Power BI data set that's published to Power BI service, you have the XML, you can use the XML endpoint, which goes in your server address, and the DB name is your database name for that data set or the data set name. And you connect to your data set that's published in Power BI service, and then again start analyzing the data for answering questions exactly like this, so that you don't have to go and then connect to that in Power BI and then get your answer. This is much faster, at least for me, to do that. Another use case here, if you can think about it, is now it allows you to reuse the semantic logic that you have defined in your Power BI data set. And what I mean by that is, if you can use the same thing. So what I showed you here earlier, what if you had a requirement where you want the customer wants to create a report where you have some advanced logic that cannot be handled by DAX or not easily handled by DAX, or you have to do it in a very weird shape or form like Excel, where you have indentation, highlight this column based on this, add a bar and all that. So very complex logic that Power BI native visuals cannot handle. Because you can connect your Python notebook like this to that published data set, you can easily write a code where it will connect to that data set, get the data out with your Python code, and then output it as a PDF on a schedule. So that way you don't have to. Yes, you can do that with paginated report and Excel, but even though they have limitations, Python so much, not so much. You can pretty much you can use your imagination and get the results out. Does that make sense so far where I'm heading with this? Any questions before I go any further?
This is really good. I never used Python, but I was thinking, okay, how we can use that to debug DAX and to do many other things, as you mentioned. This is really,
Yeah.
really cool things. So
Okay,
if
good.
anyone has any question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question or write your question in a chat.
Okay. Another use case, if you can think about this, is one big issue with a lot of the Power BI deployments is data validation and DAX validation. And what I mean by that is you have your data in the source, and then you do some transformation either in Azure or you do some transformation in Power Query, and then you write DAX. And in all of that entire process, in your ETL process, there might be something wrong. And so, how do you make sure that the results that you're getting, especially something that's very critical, right? Something like revenue, your revenue numbers. How do you make sure that the result that's displayed in your Power BI report is exactly the same as what you would get from your source system? Because you can access in Python in this notebook or VS Code, however you want to do it, you can access your source system, do the transformation, get the result back. It tells you the number, the revenue should be $3 million. You access your measures just like this from your using XML endpoint in here, and you get $3 million, and then you can write you can basically do unit testing or you can do comparison. Am I getting the same numbers? Yes, I'm getting the same numbers. So everything is good. So that acts as a data validation as well. When you're working on very large enterprise deployments, this helps tremendously because then it gives you that feedback right away that something is wrong in your entire ETL chain. Okay, so we have 12 minutes left here. I want to show you something that's also possible here is you can also embed your Power BI report inside of Jupyter Notebooks. So what I'm showing here is Colab, Google Colab. Let me get this. And I think I do have that. Let me authenticate here. Continue. Okay. And I'm providing the report ID and my workspace ID. And now you can see Jupyter Notebook can actually get your entire Power BI report. You can embed your Power BI report inside of the Jupyter Notebook. Not only that, Not only that, you can access the data directly from here inside your report. No other tool will allow you to do that. What I mean by that is you can pick any visual from here and get the metadata associated with it. So what I'm doing here is get a list of all the pages that are on my report. So it shows me all the pages. I can get the visuals that are in here. I can get report level filters, which is very hard to get. Imagine you have a report that's published in Power BI service and you're trying to figure out why my numbers are off. And often the case is you have some report level measure that's applied, that's hidden somewhere, and and you don't know what's going on. This is an easy way to get all the report level filters from there directly. And then not only that, I can export data out from any of these visuals. So I have this table here, right? So I have this matrix created. I can specify which visual and then get the data out from that visual directly, which should be here. Out directly, and then do some additional analysis on top of that, which would not be possible. So in this case, my boss asked me that, yeah, you've created this visual, but is there any correlation between any of the stuff that I'm doing? I don't have to go and then recreate that stuff in Power BI because plus one, I won't be able to do that because of the visual and the type of analysis that's Power BI affords. Um, so I can use that exact same logic without having to recreate it in Python, and then just start plotting, analyzing the data, and then get the results out, which otherwise would not be possible in Power BI. What else can you do with this stuff? You can also use it for administration purposes. So, okay, one of these here. Not this. We can call the APIs as well using Python. So if you're an administrator of a workspace or you're a tenant, I can easily access my Power BI inventory here. So let's say in here, I'm calling the APIs and I'm getting all the data flows that are in my workspace. I'm getting the refresh history. I can also get, let's say, for example, in this case, I'm identifying the data sources used in each of the data sets, the gateway used, and can you do this in PowerShell? Yes, but what you can't do in PowerShell is visualize and then munch this data. I can combine all these data together to get better insight, right? If I were to combine this with gateway ID, data source ID, connection detail, and then with the refresh history, that gives me a clear picture for which data source, which data gateway is used, and if the refresh is failing often, I can connect all those dots together to get a better picture. So you can create your reports based on that as well. So no other tool allows you to do that. There are other use cases, and we are almost running out of time here. But what I want to do next is maybe give you some pointers that what you can do to learn about Python more. If you heard about if you're into machine learning and data science, you may have heard about Jeremy Howard. Jeremy Howard, he is the founder of Fast.ai. They open source everything, but they create very high. They have a library as well, Fast.ai, for machine learning and stuff. But I subscribe to his view of learning things. And what he proposes is that if you want to learn something, um, don't try to stop and understand everything. Like what I said at the top of my presentation, don't focus on what am I doing. Just focus on the overall concept. I guess the way I learned it is this way: run the code, understand what it's first, understand what goes in and what goes out, and figure out the application for it, figure out the project for it, where you can use it and why you should use it, and then you will automatically start piecing everything together. And with help of chat gpt, of course, now you're just a couple of buttons away. If you say to chat gpt, I want to use Python to extract all my data set refreshes, it will give you that, right? but understand what goes in, what is needed for that code to work, and then you will automatically start learning all of those things. I'm not a programmer. I don't have any DBA experience. I don't have any programming experience. So I learned all of this on my own. So pick one project and make it work. Maybe somebody else's project or the notebooks that I have, which I'll share with Wahid. And then you can just use that, see how it works, and then keep using it, and then you'll automatically get a feel for it. I have some links that the one that I would like to highlight here is this course. On pandas for data analysis by Boris. I don't know his last name, Paskhever maybe, but he has a whole series of videos on this topic, and I really like. I learned from him, and I really liked his approach. He shows everything bite-sized and walks you through the process, and if you follow everything, I'm pretty sure you'll learn that. Also, focus on learning the data analysis part of Python. If you ask me to write a Python code to maybe, I don't know, to create a website or to make a game or something like that, I won't be able to do that. I don't know that. I use Python only for data analysis, which means I'm good at using pandas. I'm good at using matplotlib for plotting. I'm good at using NumPy for array analysis and things like that. So just focus on what you need, and just forget about anything else. If you need to learn it, you will learn it. But focus on pandas, matplotlib, and NumPy, uh, and you will get it. Use Jupyter notebooks like what I was showing you, because it is very interactive instead of using like a VS Code like this. It can be pretty intimidating, especially for newcomers and beginners. Where do I get started, and how do I do it, and things like that, which can be pretty intimidating. So instead of that, use the Jupyter notebooks and use Coding Assistant. And there is one tool that was just recently launched by Microsoft that will help you tremendously because it has the same look and feel or a lot of the concepts of Power Query. It's called Data Wrangler. um, you will need you can Google that, but you will need the VS Code Insider Edition. It is free. Just Google VS Code Insiders, install that. Once you have installed that, you will need Python. It will take care of that. It will ask you, do you have Python? Yes. If you don't have Python, it will say, okay, just click on here and you will install Python. And the third thing you will need is you'll go to extensions and then just look for Data Wrangler. Okay. And once you install a Data Wrangler, it will ask you, what do you want to do? In here, I just imported a CSV file. It could be the exact CSV file, or you can use create a pandas data frame like what I showed you earlier, where I copied the data from Power BI and then got it here, right? You can use the exact same idea. But it is what it does is it allows you to use UI to generate Python code. So let's say I have this small data set here and I want to filter this table. I can go to I can click up at the top. Let me see. Look at the top here, table name, and then filter, and just like Power Query, right? I can go here and then equals to or contains, and let's say it starts with INV. Apply, it highlighted that, apply. And now if you see at the bottom, it created the Python code for you, right? So it created the Python code for you. So which means that if you don't know much about Python, this is a really good way. You can start just using GUI and then understand what the Python code is created, and then start using that. It also has new column by example, which is what you have in Power Query, right? New column by example. I select the two columns and I say, get me this from this and this from this and create a new column. just like exactly like Power Query, and then you will be able to it will be able to create that Python code for you, which you can copy, paste, and or do all the stuff. So definitely take a look at that. It's still in preview. Don't use yeah, check your code, but this is a good way to learn Python if you are coming from the Power Query background.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. I know you have a meeting in few minutes, so Ashka, you have a question. If you are on a call, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask it.
Hi there. Hello,
Hi.
Vahid, and hello, Sandeep.
Amen.
I just have a quick question. I just want to know, can we add column or a new data into a row or a column in a data table? That code you used, it was df, which is data frame, equals data set, open bracket, bracket, category, close bracket, bracket. Can we
You
use
can.
this code?
Yeah, so you can anything that can be done using Python, which would be iterating over the data frame or creating new column or anything. All of that stuff can be done as a step in Power Query if you use Python as a Power Query. So if
Okay.
you wanted to add a new column, yes, you can do that.
All right, got it. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, is there any other question, or we can wrap it up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Sandeep. At the first half of your presentation, some question just popped up in my mind, but you answered all of them one by one in the second half. And thank you so much for your great presentation.
Thank you. And Wahid, I
Really
will
appreciate-
share the notebooks and everything with you,
Yeah, perfect.
so you can share it with the
Yeah.
group.
Yeah, I will share the I record the session, so I will share it on YouTube, and I will add all the details in the description of that video. So if you
Sounds
watch
good.
that video, you can find all the information in the description of that video next week, probably. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone. Have a good one. Thank you, Sandeep.